Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Madhuri Nagaraj. Thank you for allowing me to present the case for a new postgraduate hernia specialty designation, a review of Fellowship Council case logs from the past 12 years. We have no financial conflicts of interest to disclose. Some of my co-authors are listed on the executive committees as above. Abdominal wall hernias represent the fifth most common gastrointestinal disorder in the United States and occupy over 500,000 operations every year. And we notice an increase in complexity over time, particularly in two areas: hernia characteristics such as size, location, and the number of recurrences, but also the different types of repair options available to us. However, there is no formal designation that exists right now, so those cases being performed are not awarded credit for any of the programs or fellows. The Fellowship Council, initiated in 1997, serves to oversee non-ACGME fellowships. Of its many roles, it collaborates with sponsoring societies, such as the America's Hernia Society, to establish the need for a fellowship hernia designation. Our aim was to evaluate the case log database to gain baseline information for future use. We obtained de-identified case log data from 2007 to 2019. Any fellows who had performed fewer than 50 cases were excluded due to inadequate participation in the case logs, and those who had performed fewer or zero hernia cases were also excluded. Hernias were then coded by their location, the operative approach, and the use or non-use of mesh. In this 12-year analysis, we had nearly 100,000 hernia cases that we evaluated, with a nearly equal split between both inguinal and ventral hernias. That also reflects 1,500 fellows, those 5 program designations listed to the right, and 123 programs. Just examining the number of programs and fellows within the FC over this 12-year period, we can see that they both grew. Programs in blue grew from just under 70 to above 110, and number of fellows from 110 to 135. When looking at the total average hernia repairs logged per fellow in the line in gold, we can see a near doubling in this cases per fellows. This is reflected in a rise in both open and robotic cases, but a drop in laparoscopic cases. As we can see here, open cases rose by 242% over the 12 years. Robotic cases grew exponentially starting in 2014 by 267%. However, laparoscopic cases dropped by 15%. This is interesting because in the early years of analysis, laparoscopic cases reflected 76% of the fellowship experience. But by the end of our analysis, all 3 modalities represented a near equal 32 to 35% of these cases. Examining open hernia repairs even closer, we can see that there is again a near equal split between both inguinal and ventral hernias, with a clear predominance of mesh repairs at 70%. And the lines might be a little faint, but it's the gray and blue lines that represent the mesh repairs. Additionally, the gold line represents ventral hernias without mesh that reflected a high number of 27%. Now, unfortunately, in the case log database before 2019, secondary characteristics of the repair were infrequently reported, so we cannot comment on the complexity of these cases, but we presume that this is related to emergency cases, incidental hernias, or small primary repairs that were logged as well. Looking at laparoscopic hernias, we see a very similar pattern with an equal inguinal and ventral split and a high predominance at 96% of mesh repairs. And again, the same with robotic hernias. However, to note here is that clear inflection point in 2014. Looking at the total hernia repairs by program designation, just the raw numbers, we do see the rise in numbers over the years and 2 program designations that perform the vast majority: Advanced GI MIS in light blue and GI MIS Bariatrics in orange. Now, this makes sense because these are the 2 program designations that have the highest number of programs and fellows. If we examine this just a little differently by the total hernia cases performed per fellow within each designation, that pattern disappears. Those first 3 designations are actually performing an equal number of case volume. There were only 2 flexible endoscopy programs included in the analysis because they're a smaller group, and one in yellow clearly did outperform the other one. Now we're going to switch gears and look at robotic adoption specifically, which we found interesting. We grouped all of the programs by quartile based off their robotic hernia performance in 2019 and looked at their adoption of robotic hernias. Again, we see that clear inflection point in 2014, but what's interesting to note is that first quartile in blue exponentially outperformed all of the others. If we look at the 2019 cases per fellow, there is actually a statistically significant difference between all pairwise comparisons of those quartiles. Top performers performed 72 hernias, second quartile 26, third quartile 13, and the fourth quartile as low as 3.5. So our data yielded some expected and unexpected findings. Expected findings include the increasing incidence of hernia repairs, or the near doubling as you saw, which we believe reflects overall incidence as well as the specialty referral patterns, an equal split between both inguinal and ventral hernias, and the clear predominance of mesh repairs, which we believe is related to clinical guidelines. Unexpected findings that we found interesting included the equal exposure per fellow across the various program designations, showing the wide experience of fellowship exposure to hernia repairs. Additionally, if you recall my earlier graph, the fall in laparoscopic cases came shortly after the adoption of robotics in 2014, which we think is that transition to robotics and away from intraperitoneal mesh repairs. And finally, the wide variability of adoption of robotics in various programs, which is particularly important for fellows who may be seeking specific robotic experience in the future. So in total, this is a large case log database analysis. We do show a clear increase in the incidence of hernia exposure across fellows and show and provide the need for hernia designation. Some limitations include the fact that we cannot comment on the complexity of these cases. However, the new case log system implemented in 2019, we hope should address these and will aid us in help establishing accreditation thresholds. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.